13. Four-year-old little Johnny asked his mother, said, Mommy, where do babies come from? She looked at me and she said, the stork, dear. And he said, Mommy, who keeps bad people from robbing our homes? She said, the police, dear. Said, Mommy, if our house was on fire, who would save us? Said, the fire department, dear. Said, Mommy, yes. Where does food come from? Farmers, dear. Mommy, yes, dear. Why do we need Daddy? Now, a lot of folks are asking that question about the family in our society today. The family is under attack by people that are seeking to destroy it, as certainly is the way God has designed it. But let me suggest that all of the problems that we have in our families today are not problems of the home themselves from outside attacks, but many times they're from within, and that we often become our own worst enemies. Today, families are many times fragmented by a failure to follow God's fundamental design that He gave us all along. This morning in this hour, we want to talk about the question, what's the family for? It's a pleasure to be with you today. Good to see each one this morning, and I appreciate the kind of things that David has had to say. I noticed in both of the sessions, he wanted to get that out front that I'm from Indiana. And you know, don't you, how much Indiana people love UK people? You do know that, right? So I'm not sure there was some hidden agenda there, David, or not, but I guess just at least letting people know my roots. We lived in Louisville, Kentucky for 6 years, and of course, right away when I moved there, they wanted to know my allegiance. And so we had a lot of course, UK people there, so I just said, I'm for U of L. I'm a U of L guy. And one of the deacons knew me. He said, you're not either. You're just saying that. You're from Indiana. You're an IU guy. So he had me figured out right away. But I got some IU mask orders, so I hope they'll come for the weeks out so I can wear those and compete with some of the UK masks that I see around the big blue. But it's good to be in the Commonwealth. It's good to be in Lexington and be with you good folks here at University. And I appreciate the opportunity to share with you today. I think there might be a few folks that are with us during this hour that were not here at the last hour. And I would like to really encourage you to sometime as soon as you can, even this afternoon if you have time, to go on your webpage and listen to the 9:45 lesson during the Bible study. Because in that lesson, we really are laying down the fundamentals for this lesson and for all subsequent lessons that we'll be doing through Friday night. And I think it might remind you and even alert you to some of the challenges we face in our culture today regarding the family. So I hope you do that tonight at 6 o'clock is when we meet, right? 6? The topic is going to be 7 secrets of a satisfying marriage. And I really encourage you to come back for that. All ages will profit from that, regardless of how many years you've been married or if you're dating and not married. You will definitely profit from hearing that lesson. So I hope you will come back. And then to mention David's point about us traveling, we have been engaged in a itinerant kind of ministry for the past 2.5 years. And so no, we're not located with one single congregation. And I told the folks earlier, we literally don't even have a home right now. We are traveling and just rent places wherever we go. I got to figuring this up the other day. In the past 2.5 years, we have been in 34 states and 10 countries. And if my count is right, this is our 45th congregation in the past 2.5 years. So we have been on the road a little bit. But we're glad to be settled down here for a few days and to be able to be with you and to talk about these vital matters. Well, there's 4 fundamental purposes that I think God has in mind for our families that I'd like to think about a few minutes this morning. First of all, the family is a refuge from storms. The wise man said in Proverbs 14 verse 26 that he who fears the Lord has a secure fortress, and for his children it will be a refuge. And so God put in place, as we talked in the first hour, the family, and he ordered and arranged and put it in place for us that we might have a place to go to when life gets tough. There are many kinds of storms that we face in life that the family helps us get through those storms. One is a storm of change. There are a lot of changes in our culture, as we talked about earlier. Not all are bad. Some of the changes are good. But families are often subjected in dealing with these changes, and it becomes a challenge for them. But the family can provide a constant in the face of change. Alan Topher calls them islands of security in an age of future shock. And look at the changes the past 6 months. I mean, how in the world could anyone prepare for the things we've gone through in the past 6 months? I had a lot of things laid out this year. We were going to Turkey for 10 days with Barry Brenton on his group. We were going to Canada for the summer. We were going to preach in England in the month of August. We had several gospel meetings scheduled in the spring and throughout Canada during the summer. Well, all of those are canceled. And instead, we're in places where folks are wearing masks, looking. Have you noticed when you've been out in public now, if someone coughs or sneezes, everybody kind of jumps and looks around? We've gotten a little bit edgy about that. People are staying 6 feet apart, at least in some places they are. And so there's been a lot of change. Kids are studying from home. One of our grandsons is in kindergarten, and of all things, he's at home on the internet, taking school on the internet, because our daughter's concerned about him going to school with other kids. Well, when things like this hit, the family is a refuge. It's a refuge in the time of storm and the various change. It's a place of stability. And we need to make our homes places where children can feel that they're safe. And that when the storm comes and the problem comes, there's some things that won't change. Our love for them, our love for each other, our love for the Lord, and our commitment to the family. Not only that, the family is a refuge from storms of failure. Nobody wins all the time. We all make mistakes and we stumble. Sometimes we fail a test. Sometimes we don't make an athletic team. Sometimes test. There are just all kinds of situations in which we find ourselves in a situation of failure. But failure is a whole lot easier, and it's easier to handle when you have someone to come home to. Someone who loves you, someone who cares for you, someone who says to you, everything is going to be all right. I'm reminded of the prodigal son in the parable Jesus told in Luke 15. And I'm sure most of you know that story well. The young boy that decided he wanted his father's inheritance to me, and the father did. And of course, in the story, he goes off into a faraway land, and he wastes the inheritance and riotous living. I think it's implied he was involved in, maybe even with the prostitutes of that day and time. But as you know the story, that he runs out of money and thus runs out of friends. He ends up in a most repulsive place for a Jewish boy in a pig pen. But he comes to himself. And he said, what in the world am I doing down here in this pig pen? My father's servants are better off than I am. He said, I will rise and I will go to my father and say, Father, I've sinned against you and against heaven. I'm no more worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired servants. And in that story, Jesus has him as he makes that trek home, the father seeing him from a distance. Have you ever thought about why that's put into the parable? If you're a father of children, you know. Because I can imagine every day that father went out there, maybe more than once, and he looked down from his plantation and across his land and down the winding road, hoping that was the day his son would come home. And on this day he did. And in the story that Jesus told, the father ran out and embraced him. And the boy came back with tattered clothes and no shoes on his feet and the ring, the family that he had hawked. But that didn't make any difference to the father. He said, kill the fatted calf. Bring sandals to put on his feet. Bring a robe to put on him. My son was lost and is found. He's dead and he is alive. I think that we can safely say there's not many folks that have failed any worse than that boy. But in the story, Jesus is not only saying that an earthly father will receive his son back. I think the point of the story is God, the Heavenly Father, will welcome back his children when they come home after failure. So it's a wonderful thing to think about. We have a family that's a refuge from the storm of failure. And then the storm of rejection. And that's a tough one to handle. And this can begin early in childhood. Kids can be brutal in some of the things that they say to each other. Bullying is a problem today. But the home is a place of refuge in the storm of rejection. The wise man said in Ecclesiastes chapter 4 and verse 12, and if one prevail against him, two shall withstand him. And a threefold cord is not quickly broken. Rudyard Kipling once wrote about families, and he said, all of us are we, and everyone else is they. In other words, a family shares things like dreams and hopes and possessions and memories and smiles and frowns and gladness. The family is a clan held together with the glue of love and the cement of mutual respect. And a family is a shelter in the time of storm, a friendly port when the waves of life become too wild. When we have the kind of family that God's ordained and arranged, no family member is ever alone. And so how do you turn a home into a shelter from storms? J.L. Boris, who's a director of Institute of Marriage and Family Relations in Washington, D.C., wrote, we are finally realizing that we have to get back to basics in order to reestablish the type of families that give us the type of security that children can grow up in. Well, let me just bullet 4 little things here. They're simple, and you can take them and you can see how that they apply. But how do you turn a home into a shelter? You listen. You listen when your family hurts. You don't turn a deaf ear. The husbands listen to their wives, and wives listen to their husbands. And parents hear the hurts of their children. And you hug. You give physical affection, hugs and embraces and kisses and pats on the backs. Now, I will share this with you. If you're the parent of a recent teenage child, don't hug them in front of their friends. I learned, teenagers don't want to be hugged in front of their friends. You see, they're embarrassed. But when they're not around their friends, you see, it's usually okay, to do that. So just remember that one. And then to help, to give them what they need. The family is there to help each other, to support each other, to be there for one another. And then the family provides hope, that we give more strokes than pokes, that we lift each other up, that we encourage one another, that we don't tear down, and that we don't criticize all the time. We're going to be dealing with a couple of lessons later in the week, one on anger and one on dealing with conflict, that will help us in a couple of those points. The second thing I would suggest to you is that the family is a learning center for life. And it becomes a refuge from the storms of life because of that. You ever thought about it? It's in the family that you learn the most basic skills of life? In the family. You learn how to eat. You learn how to talk. You learn how to walk. You learn how to use the remote. Fundamental skills. The iPhone. I'm amazed at our 6-year-old grandchildren. They already know how to get on the iPhone. They're doing all kinds of stuff. Miles, how are you doing that? I don't know how he's doing some of this stuff. But they learn all those kind of things in the family. Well, the Bible speaks of this a bit. In Psalm 144 verse 12, he said, may our sons in their youth be like plants that grow up strong. And then in the New Testament, we're told that Jesus grew in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and with man. And so the family is designed by God to be a learning center for life. It is in the family that we learn about relationships. That God created us for relationships. It's a part of life. And to learn how to get along with each other. That Jesus learned about his relationship not only spiritually with God, but he learned about his relationship with his fellow man. And certainly in the family, we need to be teaching our children and grandchildren how to respond to people, how to get along with others, how to resolve conflict, how to deal with emotions, that we learn about relationships. It's in the family that we learn about character. Kids are going to pick up good character from me, or they're going to pick up bad character. What am I as a father role modeling for them? I love the expression that character is more easily caught than taught. And that's right. So it's not enough just to teach our kids about good character, but to live it. Evil companions, Paul said in 1 Corinthians 15:33, will corrupt good character or good morals or habits. In Proverbs chapter 20 and verse 11, the wise man said, even a child is known by his actions, by whether his conduct is pure and right. And so very early on, we need to be talking to our kids about conduct that emanates from character. The family is a learning center for life as we learn to respect authority. In Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 and 2, children are commanded, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise. There's a great problem in our culture today for kids not learning to respect authority. This is seen over the past number of years in problems in our school system and problems in society. I was in a meeting some time ago and learned there was a school teacher there and that was about to retire. She'd been a school teacher many years and she taught first grade. And so I had a little time and I asked her, I said, what is the biggest difference from the time that you began teaching first grade? And that went way back. I think probably into the late 1950s when she was teaching and when she was retiring. I said, what's changed? And she's, without hesitation, she said the biggest change is lack of respect for authority. And she said, you know, Ken, I know our schools have a lot of problems. There's a lot of challenges in the public education system today. But she says when kids come into the first grade at 6 years old and they got a disrespect for authority, that's not the fault of the school system. That we haven't failed those children when I get them in the first grade. There's already been a problem in the home. And that is evidenced today, I think, in a lot of the things we've seen in our society. A lack of respect in the home and just a general lack of respect for authority. Now, unfortunately, sometimes our leaders fail to demonstrate a lack of respect for others as well. But we need to be teaching that respect regardless of what others are doing. And then the family is a learning center for life because it's a place where we learn values. What's really important in life? What values do you want your family to believe and to embrace and to follow? William Kilpatrick who was formerly an education professor at Boston College, said there is a myth that parents don't have the right to instill their values in their children. Once again, the standard dogma here is that children must create their own values. But of course, he writes, children have precious little chance to do that. Does it make any sense for parents to remain neutral when everyone else, from script writers to entertainers to advertisers to sex educators, insist on selling their values to their children? I've actually heard people say, not so much necessarily in the church, although sometimes, that they didn't want to force what they believed on their kids. They wanted their kids to grow up and make up their own mind. Well, where does that come from? It certainly doesn't come from the tenor and teaching of God's Word that we train up our children in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord, Ephesians 6:4. And so it's in the home that we learn values. The prophet Isaiah said in Isaiah 38 verse 19 that one generation makes known its faithfulness to the next. And so fathers and mothers need to be passed that down. And in some cases we're seeing today where fathers and mothers have failed, that it needs to be the grandfathers and the grandmothers that are passing down those values to the next generation. What legacy are you leaving your children? Again, remember that your values are more easily caught than taught. Well, a third reason for the family, you might not have thought about this, but the family is a place to play. The family should be a habitat for happiness. The wise man said in Ecclesiastes 9 and verse 9, enjoy life with your wife whom you love. And then he said in Proverbs 5:18, rejoice with the wife of your youth. I know that in families today there's a lot of stress. You know, when I was a kid growing up just a few short years ago, in the 1950s, about 75% of the wives and mothers were full-time homemakers, and about 25% worked outside the home. That number's reversed today. In fact, it may even be higher than 75% of mothers work outside the home. And so I know that we have families today that both the husband and wife work, and maybe one or both of them have a second job. And you have one child that's going to soccer practice or basketball practice. Here, I'm in Kentucky. Basketball practice, of course. And another child that's going to a piano recital. And somebody's in a play, and somebody's here, and somebody's there. And I know if you've got 2 or 3 kids, you can literally be going somewhere every night of the week. Now, even without your mask, I can see your eyebrows move when I said that. I've hit a nerve with that. And so so the family can be a place of a lot of stress, sometimes a lot of problems. And we can kind of become short with each other and short-tempered. I suggest that families need to lighten up. Families need to have fun. Families need to work. And moms and dads need to work on making their home a place of joy and of laughter and of happiness. I read an interesting story. I was reading a book one time about a dad, and he was given suggestions about how to be a good dad. And he talks about this point. Of dads being fun and not being such a stick in the mud all the time. So he tells a story about a family vacation that they had planned. And some of you men have probably had this happen to you. You got something planned. Your boss at work said, no, you got to do thus and so, and you can't leave tomorrow. And so he ran in one of those. He come and told his wife, he said, we can't leave tomorrow. He said, I just can't get out of this work project. It's going to take a couple days. And so they didn't know what to do, and the kids were looking forward to this vacation. And so what he decided to do, he said, honey, he said, I've got hotels lined up and I got everything mapped out. He said, why don't you leave with the kids and you go ahead and drive to the destination, And when this project over, he said, I'll catch a plane in Flatner and beat you where we're going. And it was across the country, so the wife agreed to go along with that. And so the next day, the wife and the kids set out on the journey across the country. Well, his work project got finished a day early. And so the dad thought, I'm going to have some fun with this. And so he knew where they would be because he had the hotels all reserved along the route, how far they were going. And so he just caught a flight into the city where they were spending the night. Got a late flight into that city, spent the night there. Got up early the next morning and had a taxi cab take him out to the edge of town, right along the road he knew they'd be going, standing out to the suitcase with his thumb up. His wife comes down the road, driving the car, passes him, and as they pass, the kid said, Mom, there's Dad on the side of the road. She slams on the brakes and backs up, and sure enough, there he was. Well, the kids went wild. The wife was ecstatic. Gets in the car, and they just have a big time talking about this and why that happened. When the vacation is over and he gets back to work, and he's telling his buddies at work this, someone says to him, said, why in the world would you do such a crazy thing? I mean, it cost you extra money to change your flight, and why would you do something that crazy? He said, I'm going to tell you something. When my kids leave home and they look back, I want them to say, Dad was fun. I love that, don't you? What do you want your kids to say when they grow up and leave home? That Dad was too strict? He was a stick in the mud? He didn't have any time for me? Wasn't he fun? Or do you want them to say, boy, Dad sure was fun? You make memories when you have the home as a place to play and enjoy one another. And then finally, I would suggest the home, the family, is to be a launching pad for ministry. You see, the Lord is the glue that holds your family together. And so, as we noticed in the earlier study, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church. And the wives are to submit to their own husbands as is fitting in the Lord. And children are to obey their parents in the Lord. And so you see the common denominator, all of it is in the Lord. And so the family is to be in the Lord. It is to be a launching pad for ministry in the Lord. We began, I believe, by ministering to the needs of one another. Galatians 5:13 says, through love serve one another. Now, we typically take that verse and we apply it to the church family, but wouldn't that apply in our physical families? That in the physical family, in our homes, that we are to serve the needs of one another. And we need to teach that we are there for one another. I came across a poem a number of years ago by an unknown author entitled To My Grown-Up Son. And the first time I read it, it hit me between the eyes. And the author says, my hands were busy through the day. I didn't have much time to play the little games you asked me to, and I didn't have much time for you. I'd wash your clothes, I'd sew and cook, but when you'd bring me your picture book and ask me, please share your fun, I'd say, a little later, son. I'd tuck you in all safe at night and hear your prayers and turn out the light, then tiptoe safely to the door. I wish I'd stayed a minute more. For life is short and the years rush past. A little boy grows up so fast. No longer is he at your side, his precious secrets to confide. The picture books are put away, there are no longer games to play. No goodnight kiss, no prayers to hear. That all belongs to yesteryear. My hands, once busy, are now still. The days are long and hard to fill. I wish I could go back and do the little things you asked me to. Family is a place to minister to the needs of one another. And it's also a launching pad for ministry as we minister to the needs of the church family. Galatians 6:10 says, we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, but especially of those that belong to the family of believers. And so we minister to our church family. And children need to see that. I'm impressed so many places where I go and I see the mothers and fathers bring their kids maybe to the nursing home to visit someone. Or maybe mom has fixed a casserole, baked a pie to take someone to shut in. They bring the kids along to be able to do that. Or they learn to fix up a little card, a get well card or something of that nature. All of that is so good because it is teaching kids about ministry. And the family becomes a launching pad for ministry within the church family. But not only that, even our non-Christian friends, that we learn to do good to all people, whether they're Christians or not Christians. We live in our home the principle of the Good Samaritan. That we teach our children that we are interested in the welfare and the condition of our friends and our neighbors and our co-workers. And home is a place where we can teach that to our children. They can really see that we ought to care about the needs of our fellow man. Well, you might think of some other reasons for God creating the family, but from our earlier lesson this morning and from this lesson here, I think these are some reasons to help us appreciate why God created the family. You know, I'm reminded in Joshua chapter 24 and in verse 15, where Joshua gives that great challenge to Israel as he comes to the end of his life and they've conquered the land of Canaan. And he said, you have a choice. And he said, choose you this day whom you will serve. You can serve the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell, or you can serve the gods on the other side of the river. But then Joshua says, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what we're talking about today in this series of improving our homes where we're serving the Lord. And people can see it, our kids can see it. What's your family for? What's it about? What's it based on? Why do you have family? Chuck Swindoll, in one of his books, said, whatever else may be said about the home, it is the bottom line of life. It is the anvil upon which attitudes and conviction are hammered out. It is the place where life bills come due. It is the single most influential force in our earthly existence. No price tag can adequately reflect its value. As we close this morning and we prepare to sing the song of invitation and encouragement, might be that you owe a duty to the Lord this morning. Maybe we can lift you in prayer and help you in some way. It could well be that there's one or more here that's never obeyed the gospel. Maybe your home is not a Christian home. Could there be a father or husband here that you attend with your family, but you never obey the gospel? Why not this morning make your home a Christian home and through faith, repentance, and baptism, become a child of God and join together with your wife and children in leading your family in the ways that we've been talking about there. Maybe there's a wife or mother that's not a Christian. Would you be a Christian this morning and make your home a Christian home and join together with others that are seeking to make it so? But you know, it may well be that the majority that are in this room this morning are Christians. And you consider yourself a faithful Christian. You come this morning with no public sin that you feel the need to confess. But I know from experience, both my own experience and the observation of others, that the things we've had to say this morning may well have touched your heart and convict you to say, you know, I need to do a little better. I can be a better dad. I can be a better mom. I can be a better husband or wife. I can be a better son or daughter. And it may well be in just a moment as we sing this song that you just say a little prayer and say, Lord, help me be better, and for my family to be better, and to be everything that you created the family to be. That'd be my prayer for you. But if we can serve you publicly, would you come as we stand and while we sing?